I want to make a real contribution to the history of photography today. The camera here on the right is my Leica M4 with a 35mm Summicron. But what is this camera on the left? Do you know what that is? Right now, this week, all the YouTubers are making videos about the Leica M EV1. And I'm going to make a video about this camera on the left, which has not had its fair share of attention. I have lots of books about vintage, antique film cameras, all of them for collectors, anthologies, histories of rangefinder, everything. And I had never heard of this camera. Right, and I was deep into rangefinder.com forums when somebody mentioned it. This is the Topcon 35L. It came out right after the Leica M3, like right after. Leica hadn't even finished the rigid Summicron, the Leica Summicron. Right, so this camera is actually older than all that Leica equipment that you see on the right. And I'm here to tell you that this Topcon kicks ass. Okay, and the lens on it, which is an f2 lens, goes toe-to-toe with the Summicrons that Leica put out right afterwards. If someone offered me today a Leica M EV1 or a Leica Q43 or this Topcon, I'm taking the Topcon. To understand why I think this camera is so great, let's just start with some qualities that I think make a camera a really good one, in my opinion, especially if you're talking about just having one camera. So these must-have qualities. No shutter lag. Right? I take a lot of candid photography. I'm very deliberate about when I push the shutter button, and I want that to be my picture, not something a quarter of a second later. A quiet, nice shutter, and what I really mean is when I push the shutter, I don't want it to startle anyone or draw attention. It needs to be discreet. Right, I really want to see what I'm taking a photo of. I want to see the differences in light values, the gradation of light, the tones, the textures. Right, I want to see it all really well. I want the viewfinder to be bright, big, and beautiful and clear. I have a very strong preference for a rangefinder. I want to see not just what I'm taking a photo of, but I want to see around that too. I want to see behind it, in front of it. Right, finding the right photo is a very dynamic experience where I am looking all over and constantly evaluating, and living in the tunnel of an SLR or an EVF that functions as an SLR is not ideal. And I want it to have a great lens or a good lens that can be upgraded. I want it to be repairable. I've bought some cameras that would be awesome, but I can't find anybody to fix them. I want it to feel really good in the hands, made of good materials. It needs to be able to take some bonks so that I'm not worried about it not functioning. And I want it to be film. I have a very strong preference for the image quality of film. I really like 35mm film. Now let's go back to the list with the Topcon in mind. No shutter lag. True. Quiet, nice shutter. Yes, it has a leaf shutter that is a little quieter than my M cameras. The viewfinder is of comparable size to my Leica M's. It's either about the same brightness or maybe a little brighter. It's a rangefinder. Now this is a camera from 1956 and it has a fixed lens. Okay, it is about a 44mm lens f2. And I'm going to show you a lot of example images. And it is a great lens. I would say it's pretty darn comparable to the Summicrons of the 50s. It is repairable. I found the first person I called here in Portland, Oregon was able to repair it, and the CLA cost was actually cheaper than I'm used to. It feels very good in the hands. It feels a lot like holding an M camera. I did bonk it and it was just fine. And Topcon, if you read about the brand, they are famous for their durability. And yeah, it's a 35mm film camera. Now what about price? I've said this is better than a Leica Q43. It's like having a classic Leica M film camera with a Summicron on it. It's rare, it's 70 years old. You might think this is $1 million camera. Well, I got mine for $220 US on eBay. I got a CLA of the camera and the lens for $180. That's $400 US, which is why I would argue that this is the best camera that $500 can buy you today. Now this image was taken by the Leica Q43. And I pick on the Q43 because it has the same focal length and it represents the state of the art of digital photography today. Now, digital definitely wins when it comes to very fine detail, micro contrast, resolution, huge dynamic range with a linear response curve. But it's kind of ugly. So you put this into a raw editor and start messing around with things like micro contrast, clarity, dehaze, texture, structure, detail, sharpness, and all the parameters in sharpness, and you realize there's a lot to what makes up an image and how it appears to us, okay, than just like fine detail. And Kodak, right, Kodak film is just way ahead of where digital is now. So let me just show you, right, here's Kodak Double-X shot in my Topcon, and notice the gradation, the textures, and just the places where certain things look sharper and have edges and contours, right? It's inherent in these Kodak and other film products, comes very naturally. And in digital, right, let's go back and forth a little bit. Q43, Double-X in the Topcon. Q43, Double-X in the Topcon, right? All right, let's go back to some more Q43. I looked through the first like 30 or 40 review pages on the Q43, and these were the best photos I could find. Here, right, that extra resolution is doing this photo no favors. It sort of has a nice glowy tone, but overall the tonality is very blah. This is showing off that f2 background out of focus, but again, the tones are very blah. This, right, the grays in the jacket are sort of nice, but the tonality in the face is not. We've already looked at that one. Here, of course, if you want to know whether or not he's sweating out of the pores in his face, you want the Q43. or you want that really modern, buttery out of focus, sure, Q43. But again, just the textures and the tonality is blah. Same thing if I want to count to see how many eyebrow lashes she has, Q43. But not much else going on there. If I want to blow out my highlights and just sort of get this blocked up white, again, Q43. Now let's look at some Topcon pictures. And yeah, I'm shooting Kodak Double-X. Okay, from here on out, we're looking at images from the Topcon 35L. This shot is at f2, wide open. Notice that the center is very sharp, no signs of glow or spherical aberration. Okay, again, the shot is at f2. Another wide open shot. Lots of foliage, which would give a lot of vintage lenses trouble. Let's actually go in here at 100%. Let my computer catch up. And this is wide open. And then this is 2.8. This is also f2. And you can feel a little vintage swirl and swoosh. I'd say it's mostly interesting and beautiful. Also wide open. And then here's wide open where I'm pretty close. Speaking of pretty close, the minimum focus distance on this is around 0.75 meters, which is excellent. Right, all the foliage on this Japanese maple, right, you get a little bit of sort of interesting vintagey texture in there. Okay, let's see some stop-down shots. Right, I mean, this lens is sharp. Yeah, I think this is 5.6. Okay, here I'm at about f4. Same here. This was 2.8. That's 2.8. Or maybe 4. I mean, really consistent performance. All right, a little bit of a flare test. I actually thought this would throw some flare. And then I went with one that I absolutely knew would have flare. But I think I'm impressed that this one didn't have any flare. This is a 2.8 shot. .8. 2.8. This was a 2.4. I mean, look how sharp that is for being a 1956 lens. This Tokyo Optical Company. 2.5. 2.5. Here I actually put the fire hydrant in focus. Just testing out a little bit of foreground out of focus. Looks very nice. Looks how I want what I want. This was f4. F4, and I'm focused on the door here, just because I wanted to see this whole arm out of focus. This is 5.6. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the camera as I go along. 44mm is basically like the true normal of 35mm film, meaning it gives a very natural perspective. There's not really any distortion of distances. The finder on this thing is a 1x, which means you can shoot both eyes wide open. Which is actually how I found it, because I was obsessively looking for all rangefinders with a 1x viewfinder. Right, when you have both eyes open and it's a 1x, the frame line basically is like floating in space, and you have your whole vision. It's really a fun way to shoot. I mean, this looks so good. Now this one's 5.6. This is actually a flare test. The sun is just outside of frame. This is a bit of a flare test too. The sun was shining off the road. It was very bright. I also have in here, if we go look at this Toyota, right, those are very intense specular sunbeams bouncing off that chrome. This is just a picture of a big fire hazard. My favorite mailbox in the neighborhood at f2.8. It's raining. Remember if this was f4 2.8. Look at that. I mean, it's such a there are no quick transitions in image quality. It's very consistent. Oh, this next one's a fun one. So this is the halation of Double-X. So the sun is actually in the frame to the top of this tree. So this was huge sunlight coming over the top of the building. And I thought it was going to be a flare test. It ended up being like a Double-X halation experiment. I see zero distortion in this lens. Here's the shot I was showing early on. All right, I did get flare in this shot. That's okay. I did find, right, I actually had 3 different lens hoods that worked on this lens. In a situation like this, they would help, right, if I wanted to prevent that type of flare. But the camera didn't come with a lens hood. This is sort of so this is 1/20th of a second. I found that if I wanted to guarantee a sharp shot, I needed 1/50th. If I was doing any slower than that, I needed to take 2 pictures. But this is the sun shining off this pool of water over here on the bottom right. Right? Look at all those little specular halos. This shot's a little underexposed, but still looks pretty good. I think that's f4. Now that's wide open. This one's wide open. All right, getting close to the end here. All right, now more about the camera. So earlier I went through the must-have qualities. This next category are the yes qualities. I love that it has a 1x viewfinder and I can shoot with both my eyes wide open. I like the 44mm focal length. It has a very natural, normal perspective. The camera feels very premium and durable. It has no electronics, no battery. Right. Shots on one charge, 50,000. Right. The lug position is very comfortable. It's very comfortable to put the camera up into the corner of my eye, right, against my nose for support. It's very comfortable. The finder has basically nothing in it other than a frame line and your focus aid. It has a very nice shutter button. 0-second startup time. Okay, next is the nice category. It's easy to load the film. There's a film reminder, and it can differentiate between color film and black and white film. It has parallax correction as you change your focus distance. The weight is about 720 grams, which is a really good weight. It is nice to carry this in one hand. This excellent lens is a 6-element double Gauss design. The minimum focus distance is around 0.75 meters, which is very nice because I often want to get inside of 1 meter. And then I tested the 1/500th shutter speed, and it's legit. And you can also sort of think of like only having one great lens, a fixed lens camera, is like you're not going to be tempted to buy a bunch of other lenses until you're really ready to switch into a different system like an M. There's no bright red dot on the front. Okay, next category is like, sure, qualities. It's a manual counter reset. The rewinding is slow like an M3, maybe even a little slower than an M3. The frame line is mostly bright. It's not as bright as my Leicas, and sometimes it sort of kind of fades away depending on the lighting. You can always see it, but not always super well. The lens has like this EV system where, right, if you think in terms of EVs, it's really awesome, which I do. But if you don't, you can totally ignore it. The 35S model doesn't even have it. The 35L does. If you just learn to set your shutter speed first in your aperture, then you can totally ignore the EV system. The advance is ratcheted, so it takes at least a double stroke, but it could be 3 or 4 or 5 strokes. I like to do a series of little strokes. The finder is decently flare resistant, like an M2. And it has that blue gold sort of coloring where the rangefinder patch has a little goldish tint for extra contrast. There's no cloth shutter, so you can't burn a hole in it. And because the lens doesn't come off, you don't have to worry about dropping it or getting dirt inside. All right, next is the qualities. You are stuck with one lens. It is slower to change the shutter speed and aperture compared to a Leica. Not way slower, but a little bit slower. Yeah, if you're going to change the shutter speed, do it first, and then maybe change the aperture if you need to. It's not as fast as an M3 for focusing. I'd say it's a little slower. The rangefinder patch doesn't have the rectangle. That's the biggest difference. The focusing direction is backwards compared to Leica's. Yeah, I'd say it's probably more prone to dents because it's not made of brass. When you get a CLA, you're CLAing the camera and the lens. You can't just have the camera done. And then to get it into the 1/500th, you do have to give it some extra force. Yeah, the rangefinder patch has no edges. But at the same time, it can be sort of nice where when you really lock in your focus, you don't even see the rangefinder patch. All you see the frame lines, and you see right what you're taking a picture of. And then, yeah, the lens is not weather sealed, but the not great, I would say, the aperturing doesn't quite line up. The numbers don't quite line up to the notches. And my wide open f2 is actually a half a turn past the f2 mark. Resetting the frame counter is a little difficult unless you have smaller fingers like a pinky. And it's not easy to find this thing, especially out of Japan. The versions and the prices, there's the 35S, 35L, which are basically the same thing. The S doesn't have the EV system. There are versions where the finder is a little different. The JL actually has a 2.8 lens. So I have the L. And then, yeah, prices are sort of all over the place right now. On rangefinder.com, right here's where I first learned about this camera. And there's the S above and the L, and they basically look the same. And I'm really glad I found this camera. And I'm going to recommend it to people who are trying to find a film camera for under $500. I'm going to say, well, you can get this thing, and you can get it CLA'd for like $350 to $500, and it's a fantastic camera.